evening. I see here Rabbi Ron Hofberg from Prague and many other interesting locations. Robert Rifkin from New York. Bruchim habayim. So we have a very interesting lineup this evening of 4 brief lectures about Pesach. The first with Rabbi Irena Gritsevskaya, the struggle for freedom from ancient Egypt to modern Ukraine. Then I will talk about the art of illuminated Haggadot, part 2. Then our new lecturer, Dr. Avi Baritan, will talk about musical renewal in the songs of the Haggadah. And Professor David Frankel of Schechter will answer the question, who took the Jewish people out of Egypt, God, an angel, or a prophet? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Irena, who, as many of you know, is the director of Midreshet Schechter, the Mankalit, the director general, both of Midreshet Schechter in Israel and in Ukraine. Though needless to say, during the past 50 days, she's been mostly devoting most of her time to Ukraine. She's already been there twice and is planning to go back for Pesach. And we thank her for all her efforts. Irena, bevakasha.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me, really, to be here today. And I decided to give some kind of personal reflection of what's going on and how it reflects on my own life. I'll try to share the brief presentation I've prepared. Try this. So I actually grew up in the Soviet Union, but not in Ukraine, in Russia, in Leningrad. And what it meant to be Jewish for me, actually, it meant to have a very strong Jewish identity. So when people tell me all the time, I kind of Hazarti b'tshuva, I came back to Judaism, for me, this expression is non-acceptable because for me, it's going further. It's actually deepening my Jewish connection, which was strong in the beginning and continuing further. So being Jewish in the Soviet Union meant working harder. It was kind of thinking and mentality more than really religious observance. But in that aspect, I can tell you that many of my Jewish friends, when they ask their parents what it means to be Jewish, they accept the answer that it means that you will have to work harder than others if you want to succeed. So definitely, anti-Semitism was one of the things that defined your Jewishness. It also meant to think creatively, to think outside the box, because you had kind of a dual identity, something that you can talk at home and you never talk outside of your house. And the same worked to both of the directions. So we all had kind of a dual life. And that, I think, resulted in thinking outside of the box and finding creative solutions. Thinking critically, it's another part of it, which basically for me in my childhood meant being Jewish, asking questions. And I think Pesach is about asking questions and teaching our kids how to ask smart, creative questions. That's what actually was being Jewish. It also meant family values that include my people, family that is not only my closest family, but also peoplehood as a concept. Trying to find a Jewish person everywhere you go actually meant being Jewish. Regarding the religious experience, it was very, very limited. And 3 things were the main that I remember from my childhood growing in Soviet Union. One is Simchat Torah. For some reason, that hard to understand was really the biggest. Simchas Torah was the biggest holiday where people actually, I remember myself as a young child going to the synagogue when we were hiding our faces as if nobody would find out that we were entering, because you could pay a price. My parents could pay a price when they would be seen there. Yom Kippur was for older people. I remember my grandmother going through the whole city to say Iskor. That was the idea, that she should come to Yom Kippur to say Iskor for her parents. And the main thing was definitely Pesach, where it actually was kind of limited. I didn't have seder as a child in my house, but it was limited to eating the matzah. Matzah was a biggest symbol of Pesach, and I really remember myself as a child going with my parents to the synagogue to get matzah. It was in a special bags. And then when you would go through the city, you would see other Jews having the same type of bags. And then you would know that they're coming from the same place as you are. It was kind of a feeling of being together without really telling that you are together. So I remember even how it looked like, those bags, that we were all searching for other people in the city going around with those bags. And eating a matzah was actually a symbol of Pesach. So for me today, Pesach is about finding the meaning. That's actually the main purpose of Pesach every year anew. And the main challenge of Pesach is actually finding how you came from Exodus, but every year the question changes as the life changes. And luckily or unluckily, the life is full with challenges, and every year we have it anew. Last year it was a corona, COVID, and this year we have the war in Ukraine. This actually creates a huge challenge for those who are there. And this year I'm going to have my Seder Pesach in Ukraine with Ukrainian Jews. So in a few days, I will be leaving Israel and going to have Seder Pesach in Ukraine. And this discussion for me is kind of an attempt to think together with you how we find meaning in what's going on there today, and how our Seder will be different from the last year and the year before, and what actually we are talking about. What challenges do we have today in Ukraine that make this year different from other years? That's the question that we will be asking this year, but the answer will be in time this time, not how it's different from other years, other days of the year, but how this Pesach is different from other Pesach nights that we had together in the past. So a little bit about matzah in the Soviet Union in general as the greatest symbol, actually, as this holiday. The fight for matzah existed throughout all the Soviet history. In 20s were actually the Jews who said that the matzah is dangerous. And there were a lot of publications by Jews themselves who told we should not eat matzah since it's a religious symbol. Then in the 30s, in the city where I'm from, in Leningrad itself, there were prohibition to produce matzah, and some of the Jews actually filed complaints to Stalin that they asked to eat matzah as something very important to them. Some of them were persecuted and even killed in the Stalin days. So there were actually people for whom it was the most important thing. And then we start with prohibitions, and then it's permitted, and it's prohibited, and it's permitted. To eat matzah in the Soviet days, it was actually the challenge that people fought for. One of the things that sometimes it was financial. Even if it was allowed in 49, we have a records that there were taxes introduced for the production of the matzah. I will bring you two numbers just because I'm going to Chernovtsi, our refuge city for all the Jews of our communities now is in Chernovtsi, which is a small city. It used to be Austro-Hungaria before the war. It's on the border with Romania. And relatively safe place. That's why many Jews from our communities are now staying there, and Midreshet Schechter is actually providing the shelter for them, places to live, food to eat, and Seder Pesach that we are coming to have there. So in this city, Jews paid 200,000 rubles as a taxes for production, more than in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine at the same time. So it always was a Jewish city, and now it's Jewish city again just because it's a refugee place, and Jews from many places came there. In 1962, it was prohibited everywhere in the Soviet Union, and I brought you some documents just to show you how important it was for KGB in those times, from 1975. It's the letter that was written to the head of the Communist Party, Chernenko, by KGB leader Andropov. Andropov became the leader of the Communist Party later. So he was not just the leader of KGB. It's not a new thing that KGB people become the leaders of the country. It used to be already then. And he, as the head of the KGB, writes the letter that's called Confiscation of Packages with Matzah sent to USSR by Zionist organizations from abroad, meaning American Jews and Israeli Jews that are sending matzah to their friends inside USSR. The translation is mine, so please be, Zionist circles in the Western Israel, using the coming religious holiday Jewish Pesach, have organized massive delivery to USSR of packages with matzah, ritual Pesach food, hoping for raising of nationalistic feelings among Soviet people of Jewish origin. Even now in Odessa, Riga, Lviv, and other cities, there are numerous packages for people who are known having national identity and pro-Israeli views. As we know from the past experience, these packages negatively influence Jewish population of USSR and strengthen national and immigrant ideas. So you understand how important it was for the Soviet power to actually to control the matzah, and how they saw the influence of eating the matzah on Soviet Jews then, how it actually strengthened their Jewish identity and allowed them to have views that were not welcomed. So matzah is actually a symbol, and it's a symbol today too, today in Ukraine, because most of the, and that's something that happens now, and that's why this war is actually unbelievably hard for the people, because it is true that when we are speaking about Soviet times, there's no really division between Russian Jews and Ukrainian Jews. I myself, my mom's family is from Ukraine. Actually, during the Holocaust, they were all killed in Vinnytsia, one of the Ukrainian cities in Podolia. And my dad's family is from Leningrad, Russia itself. And I think most of the Russian Jews, they're coming from Ukraine and from that territory sooner or later. And today, it's the level of hatred is just unbelievable. And it's very hard, even among Jews, though we are the same nation, to have any conversation about what's going on. That's, I think, one of the reasons why this war was so painful for all the parties, and it still is. And for many reasons, Pesach today, it's an opportunity to rethink about what actually happened. Matzah is actually a symbol for many things, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it, Torah says to us, and many symbolic meanings are found in matzah. So one of the symbols is the symbol of past redemption. Jews actually had no time. And the redemption was so fast that the Jews left before the bread could be leavened, and that's why we eat matzah. In Ukraine today, this symbol of fast redemption is the most important one, since one of the hardest things psychologically for the people today is the instability and the lack of knowledge what will happen tomorrow. When you ask people, what's going to happen? Are you going to stay in the places where you ran away, in Israel or in Europe or wherever you are now? You will not get an answer, because it's very hard to plan for more than for longer period of time, because no one knows how long this war will last and what will happen. It's important to understand that families are divided right now. Men are in Ukraine, because they're not allowed to leave. Men from 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave, even if they have an Israeli passports or foreign passports. And women and children mostly or partly left and they're now in Israel, in Europe, and other places. We're having our Berlin community welcoming our families, and many Israeli communities welcoming the families who came here. And when you ask people what they're going to do, what they're planning to do, you will not get straight answers. Because on a short time, people want to come back, but no one knows if this situation will continue and for how long it will continue. And that's one of the reasons that people today pray for fast redemption. And fast is the important thing in order to see their families that they can't really see now, their fathers, their sons, and to get back to the places they're used to be in. In Pirush Kadum, a Yemenite commentary from the 16th century, this symbol is stated like that. Just as the Passover offering taught the swiftness of God's justice, so matzah teaches us the swiftness of God's act. There was not even time for the people to lower their doves, to rise when he redeemed them. The people could not tarry while the dove became leavened, and there was no time for them to prepare provision for their journey. The dove they brought out of Egypt provided them with food for an entire month, from the 15th of Nisan until the 15th of the next month, when they came to ask God for food in the wilderness. So one of the things that we are doing now, not to every place in Ukraine we can get to, right? So some places are relatively safe, so I can really enter across the border and go there. But to some places, it's very hard to get. One of the places is Kharkiv. Kharkiv is on the eastern side of Ukraine, and it's on the border with Russia. It's actually 100 kilometers from the border with Russia, and it's now one of the most bombed cities. We had a community there. We actually have a community there, and the school, Jewish day school that we supported, 150 Jewish students who studied there. And by now, some of those people are still there. Our school now is turned to the shelter. People are staying there. It's very hard to get there. Actually, yesterday night on Motzei Shabbat, we managed to send a car there with all the Passover food that they need to have a seder, and it was really a miracle, because it's very hard to find a transportation that will get there. So now, by now, it should be already there, hopefully. But since people are scared to get out of the houses because of the bombing, then they won't have a communal seder. And it makes very difficult for them to have seder in the house just because they're not used to. So one of the things that I did, actually talking to people and helping them to have some kind of seder, whatever is possible in the circumstances like that. And we read this text by Pirush Kadum, and one of the things that that people said to me, that it works the both directions, as well as you can get fast redemption the same way. Very fast, people had to leave their places, going to the places they don't know this war, just taking a small bag with them and running away. And that's actually what happened a month and a half ago with many of the people from Kharkiv, and some of the people even now, because even those who stayed there for a month and a half now left. We have a lot of people from Kharkiv in Chernovtsi right now, and they're actually living fast. As fast as they hear that there is an opportunity to live, they have to live fast, and that's actually God's act as well. So now one of the prayers that we will say on the Seder, that we are wishing for the fast redemption and fast opportunity to get back to the places where they left not only their life, but also people they love sometimes. The other symbolism is lechem oni, and actually it's the symbol of slavery, as well as it's the symbol of redemption. Matzah is the symbol of slavery, Rabbi Yerachmiel Danziger wrote that the purpose of matzah is to bring us to a state of submission and self-abnegation. That's something that you don't need to tell to people now, because actually the life made them live with nothing. People now in Ukraine, even those who stay there, they have no jobs because all the infrastructure is ruined. So most of the people, they don't have salaries, don't have work to do. They are moved to the places where they have nothing. And one of the things that we support is financial assistance for more than 150 people in Ukraine right now. And actually the need is huge because people just don't have their regular sources of income. And even when they're in the places where they can go out and buy food, they basically don't have any means to do that. So that's one of the most of the important things that we are doing. And one of the things that we are doing is just starting from today, in the 3 days before Pesach, we are dividing the financial aid to people to be able to buy the basic stuff for Pesach, to have a respectable Seder in the places where we can't go and make it for them. And maybe the last thing about the matzah is the fact that it's Zecher LeKurban Pesach. And one of the things that people in Ukraine now need is to deal with the trauma, to deal with what happened there. I will tell you that it's not my first time during this war that I'm going to Ukraine. I've been there for Purim too. We read the Megillah together with Rabbi Avinoris Deutsch. We brought the Megillah with us, and we had a very joyous celebration of Purim together with people there. And till you don't come there, it's very hard to imagine what's going on there. But one of the things that people who are refugees from other places feel, they're actually experiencing a huge trauma. Even though Chernovtsi now is a relatively safe place. It's on the Romanian border. It doesn't have any military bases around it. And relatively, it's safe there. But it has always sirens. Sirens in Ukraine are long. They last from 1 hour to 5 hours. The longest was 5 hours. When I was there, it was an hour and a half. And you don't know when it will be over. There's no shelters. So you kind of walk around to find a safe room where everybody is meeting. And after I had a conversation with people who ran away from really places that were bombed, you realize that they don't sleep at night. You know, the siren that I had was in the middle of the night, so I wake up and they come to have a conversation with people there in the shelter. Let's call it shelter. And people say me, it's not a problem for us because we can't sleep anyway. We just continue seeing the images that we run away from them. So people are having really trauma, kind of trying to forget what they left and where they were. And one of the things that Pesach is doing is trying to heal the trauma, because Pesach, in a way, it's a celebration of our national trauma. The fact that we had Beit Mikdash and now we don't have it. That's why we're not reading Torah and we are reading the Agadah, the creation that is based on the Mishnah, that all its purpose in a way it's to find the ways to continue the tradition, to continue the ritual in the place where you don't have Beit Mikdash. You can't really have it the same way, and you have to change all everything that you are used to, and still you have to survive. So I think that's the main question for the Jews in Ukraine today. How do you deal with something that you can't go back to? There's no way for you to go back to it. And you have to survive. You have to find ways to live with it and to have a meaningful celebration with it. In the Schechter Agadah, the wonderful Agadah that has many stories, there's a quote from Jerusalem Talmud. It's in Chala, that speaks about the Hillel sandwich, the korach. that we have matzah, that we actually have the three things together, but it discusses the passage that we wrote about, that we eat bitter herbs, matzah and Pesach together. And it says that Hillel the elder would wrap the three together. Rabbi Jonathan said others disagree with Hillel the elder, but did not Rabbi Jonathan himself wrap matzah and maror? So Hillel used to eat all three things together. Rabbi Jonathan said that others disagree with him. You have to eat it separately. But he himself wrapped them together. Why that happened? And then Talmud explains us that actually for him, it was different in the times before the temple and in the times after the temple. So we change our tradition after there's no temple to adapt to the change and to create a different tradition. And that's why in a later time, there is an addition that actually it's in the Zecher LeKorban, remembrance of the sacrifice. That's why this tradition is added. So changing the tradition as a healing of the trauma is actually our tradition. And I'm thinking now, what will we do different in our Pesach today that will allow us to heal the trauma? One of the things we will have to do differently, and that's something that also have to be understood, even in Chernovtsi, the relatively safe city today, there is, you can't go out after a certain hour. So we really have to make our Pesach short and to change the whole order of it in order to be able to get to our homes before the curfew. Before the curfew, right. So we actually discussed it today with Professor Golinkin, what would be the right halachic way to do it in order to allow all the people to come and join and to get back in a safe time in order to be able to have a meaningful celebration, but also the halachic celebration in a place where it's hard to do. Except for that, of course, everything that we are doing will be colored with what we have experienced, what people have experienced there, since it's now half of the people, local community from Chernovtsi, and half of the people are refugees from different cities that just came there, and some of them came just now, basically now. And I can tell you, as someone who had been there in Purim, people who came now, they look different from people who came 2 weeks ago. And that's something that you can really see. So it won't be easy, but hopefully we will be able to have a meaningful celebration. And one of the things that, and with that I will finish, one of the things that really were amazing in this war is the feeling of Arbut Hadadit and of Jews being together and coming together. It's really incredible to see how much help we can give to the people who are there and how fast we were able to be organized in order to provide this help and this assistance, thanks to a lot of generous people and amazing people, incredible people that are allowing me to do what I'm doing. In a way, people see me as someone who is coming, who is doing, but that's not me. That the whole organization and a lot of people who stand behind me, who are making it possible for the people basically to survive, to leave the places, to go to the safe places, and even have a meaningful Jewish life nowadays. So usually we say next year in Jerusalem. That's what I'm going to say, and I hope to have next year in Jerusalem. But I know that many people who are now in Chernovtsi, they will say next year in Kiev, next year in Kharkiv, next year in Odessa. Thank you very much, and I'm here for all the questions and everything that all the time, and I will let you listen to other interesting things today.
Toda Rabba Irena, thank you very much for all your efforts, for your incredible work for the past 50 days, during which Irena has been working day and night to help our people there, both in Ukraine and as they leave the country and go to Europe and to Israel. We thank all of you who have already supported our emergency campaign for Ukraine. If you have not yet done so, you can click on the Schechter.edu screen or on the announcement you got about these classes and contribute. We're spending at least $20,000 a week on all of the things that Rabbi Arena mentioned, including providing money directly to people who cannot leave their cities, providing food, especially in Chernovitz, where we have rented 6 apartments and many hotel rooms. And one of the nice things we did during the past week, which I was involved in, was this Haggadah. This Haggadah was produced by the Masorti movement in Israel in 1993, edited by Rabbi Michael Gretz. It's a trilingual Haggadah, English, Hebrew, and Russian. It had been sitting on my shelf for many years unused. I had one copy. We took it apart. We took it to our printer. We printed a few hundred copies for use here in Israel and in Germany. We sent the PDF to Chernovitz, and Lev Kleiman, who runs our community there, is now printing the Haggadah in Chernovitz, 150 copies for use at our communal Seder there, together with Rabbi Arena this coming weekend. So that in a nutshell are some of the things going on in Ukraine and the relationship between the struggle for freedom today in Ukraine and the struggle for freedom in the Haggadah. And I would like to end this segment by emphasizing what Rabbi Arena said, which is really the Haggadah and the Seder were a revolution after the destruction of the Second Temple. Until the year 70, Jews observed Pesach by bringing a Korban Pesach, by bringing a sacrifice. And all of a sudden, there's nothing. How are they going to observe the Seder? And the rabbis at Yavne, led by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, innovated the Passover Seder, which of course we have been observing for the past 1950 years. So it just shows that with ingenuity, you can create new rituals and deal with a new historical phenomenon which did not exist before. And that is exactly what we've been doing in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine for the past 50 days. We hope that the war will end soon, but in the meantime, we will do everything that we can to help the Jews there and the Jews who have left and are now refugees. And now, as they say in Hebrew, b'ma'avar chad, with a steep turn, we will now address a totally different topic related to Pesach. And I'm going to put this up like this. And that is the topic of the art of the illuminated Haggadot, part 2. For those of you who have good memories, you know that I started discussing this last year. I will continue this year. And at the current rate, I'd say we have, God willing, 10 more years to go before we finish the Haggadah. As you may know, as Rabbi Arena mentioned, in 2009, we published the Schechter Haggadah. I provided the 115 illustrations from illuminated Haggadot. Dr. Josh Culp provided the commentary, which Rabbi Arena quoted just a few minutes ago. And I would like to deal with 4 of the images or sets of images in the Schechter Haggadah. And the first one has to do with something we're going to do on Thursday night, which is B'dikat Chametz. Okay. So where is it? Just one moment. Do you see anything on screen? I'll try again.
While Rabbi Glinken is setting this up, I've included the link for both the Schechter Haggadah as well as the Ukraine Emergency Fund in the chat for anyone who is interested.
Okay. Well, one of you are going to have to help me, Karen, because as usual, one of the things I had for share screen has disappeared. So I'll start with the other one. Maybe I can move this over. Okay, here it is. Here's the other one. Okay, can you see this on screen?
Yep, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay, good. So this is one of the images from the Schechter Haggadah. In the Haggadah, it's on page 114. And I have in the Haggadah 4 illustrations of Bedikat Chametz, of searching for the Chametz. And in a minute, we'll look at the other ones, but this one is one of the oddest ones. And it's so odd that Rabbi Professor Daniel Sperber devoted an entire article to trying to explain this illustration. This is taken from a very famous Haggadah, and I'm holding up the facsimile edition, which is so large that it fills up the entire screen, right? This facsimile edition is about 1.5 feet tall. It's of a manuscript found in London. It's from the mid-15th century in the British Library, illuminated by Yoel ben Shimon. And Yoel ben Shimon was not only a very successful illuminator of Haggadot, he has the distinction of being the person who has more Haggadot of his preserved than any other illuminator from the medieval period. We have in our possession 7 different Haggadot illuminated by Yoel ben Shimon around the year 1450, in the middle of the 15th century. His name is Yoel ben Shimon Ashkenazi, which means he's from Germany. But usually if your last name is Ashkenazi, it means you're not living in Germany. He was actually living in northern Italy. And we're not sure which of these Haggadot were done in Italy and which were done in Germany, but it really doesn't make any difference. He's a very Ashkenazi illuminator. And here you see a person dressed in very fancy clothing. I'll make it a little bigger if I can. Dressed in very fancy clothing. I'm sure that originally his skin was not dark colored, but that's what happens to illuminated manuscripts throughout the centuries. And he has, of course, some feathers in his right hand, which is the custom until today. And he is scooping the chametz into a bowl. The only problem is that it isn't a bowl. It is half a bowl. And the question is, why is this very wealthy man who's dressed in very fancy clothing, who even has a money belt on his belt, why is he using half a bowl? Is he too poor to afford an entire bowl? And the answer to this is that this has to do with the halachic opinion of a very famous rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Molin, who's called the Maharil. And the Maharil died in 1427. In other words, just one generation before Yoel ben Shimon, who did this illustration. And he says in 2 places in his writings that you're supposed to put chametz in your house to search for it during Bedikat Chametz. And it could be that the reason in Medinot Halalu, in these countries, there is a custom lisrof hake'ara, to burn the bowl, av keshe'en motzim chametz, even when you don't find any chametz in your house, sheyizkeru bitul sheni, so that you remember the next morning that you have to burn the chametz and recite the formula kol chamira to annul the chametz once again. In other words, Rabbi Yaakov Molin, who lives just a few decades before this illustration, is saying that if you don't find chametz in your house, well, the least you can do is burn the bowl. And similarly, Rabbi Isaac Tirna, who is also died around the year 1450, a little bit older than Yoel ben Shimon Ashkenazi. Im lo matzah chametz balayla, if he did not find chametz at night, mikom makom yisrof hake'ara shebadak ba lezikron bitul, he should burn the bowl which he used for bedikat chametz in order to remember the bitul, the annulment of the chametz, the next day. And indeed, when you open up the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, living in Krakow, died in the year 1570. And he writes in Orach Chaim, paragraph 445, Taf Mem Hey, V'im lo matzah chametz keshebadak yisrof hakli shelakach libdika kidei shelo yishkach chovat bi'ur. If he did not find chametz in his house, then he should burn the utensil which he used for bedikat chametz in order not to remember the obligation to burn next morning and to annul the chametz the next morning. So apparently, the reason this very wealthy man in Ashkenaz around the year 1450 is using half a bowl is because he knows that he's going to have to burn it the next morning. And why waste a good bowl? And indeed, after I published the Schechter Haggadah, this I did not put on screen. After I published the Schechter Haggadah, Professor David Stern published a facsimile of another Yoel ben Shimon Haggadah, which is called the Washington Haggadah. Why is it called the Washington Haggadah? Because this manuscript is in the Library of Congress in Washington. And you open up the very first page of the Washington Haggadah. I'm going to hold this up to the screen. Look in the lower corner. You see there's a guy dressed in typical clothing of the 15th century, and he's using a bellows to fan the flames of a fire to burn the chametz. And if you have good eyes, you can see that in the middle of the fire, there is a bowl. In other words, this illustration from another Yoel ben Shimon Haggadah confirms what Professor Sperber wrote about this Yoel ben Shimon Haggadah. In other words, not only do we see that they used half a bowl here because they were worried about having to burn the bowl, but in the other Yoel ben Shimon Haggadah, we see the bowl that was actually being burned in the fire. So that those teachings of the Maharil, Rabbi Yaakov Molin, and Rabbi Isaac Tirna explain this illustration. Now we're going to make this a little bit smaller, and we're going to turn it around. Okay, this is another illustration of Bikat Chametz. This is taken from the famous Golden Haggadah. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so you can see the entire illustration. It's very beautiful. The reason this is called the Golden Haggadah is because the illustrator actually used gold for these illustrations. This is not Crayola crayons. This is real gold. And this is taken from the Golden Haggadah, which was written in Catalonia, in Spain, around the year 1320, about 130 years before the first Haggadah we looked at. It's now in the British Library. And you can see the family is doing Bedikat Chametz, or cleaning the house, as the case may be. You can see that the mother is sweeping the ceiling with a broom. It's nice to know that Jewish women then were just as meshuggah about cleaning for Pesach as they are today, not just Jews, not just women, but men. She's actually sweeping the ceiling with a broom. The daughter is on the floor cleaning the floor. The husband with the beard, you notice, by the way, the husband's head is not covered, which is a topic of a totally other different lecture, which I'm not going to do right now. The husband is putting a stick inside the cracks. It says in the Mishnah, Mechapsim bachorim uvastakim. They look in the nooks and the crannies for chametz. And the little boy is holding a bowl. He too does not have his head covered. And notice he is holding an entire bowl because he lived in Spain and not in Germany. He wasn't worried about anyone burning his bowl. So we see here Bedikat Chametz in Catalonia around the year 1320. I'm going to skip the next one. And here, we're in a different geographic area. I'm going to make this bigger. Back to Ashkenaz. Whoops. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so
Can we
this...
scroll down a little bit more?
Sure. These are two relatively later Haggadot. The one on the left is from a very famous Haggadah we're going to return to in a couple minutes. It's called the Prague Haggadah. It's not the first printed Haggadah, but it's one of the first printed Haggadot. Prague, 1526, by Gershom and Grunem Katz. And it became the model for many subsequent Haggadot. These are woodcuts, black and white illustrations. And here you see the basic ingredients, what you need for Bedikat Chametz. You got the bowl, you have the feather, you have the candle. The one on the right is surprising because you would think that after the invention of printing, there would no longer be a need for illuminated Haggadot. If you thought so, you would be wrong. Even after the invention of printing, for hundreds of years, people continue to do illuminated Haggadot, as they still do today, whether it's Rabbi Matt Berkowitz, who illuminated the other Haggadah published by Schechter, the Lavelle Haggadah, or David Moss, or many other contemporary illustrators. And this Haggadah was illuminated by Nathan ben Rabbi Shimshon of Mezerich, Moravia, in the year 1730. Okay, so we're now in the 18th century in Moravia. You'll notice the man is wearing a flat beret, which is a typical hat at that period of time. He's wearing a long cloak and a short tunic, also typical of that period of time. And of course, he's holding a feather in his right hand and a bowl with a candle stuck in it in his left hand. The question is, why is there so much light coming in from the window? As you know, we do B'dikat Chametz, or L'Arba Asar, in the 14th of Nisan in the evening, right? In this year, this Thursday evening. Well, you would not expect that on the evening, when they're doing B'dikat Chametz with a candle, there would be so much light coming in from the window. So it's obviously not sunlight. So my suggestion is, which is what I wrote here in the caption in the Haggadah, it may be moonlight since B'dikat Chametz takes place where there is a full moon, right? Since it's the middle of the month of Nisan, it could be that is moonlight coming in through the window, but it is definitely not sunlight because that would not be appropriate for a nighttime ritual such as B'dikat Chametz. Okay. I'm going to show you one more illustration here, and then I want to segue to my last topic. This is an amazing illustration. It illustrates something that is done by Moroccan and North African Jews until today. And since my wife is half Moroccan, so this is what we do every year at the Seder, which is that when you get to Halachma, before singing Halachma to whatever tune you know, Halachma, Halachmanya. Before Halachma, you sing three words, which are found in all Sephardic Haggadot. Bivhilu Yatzanu miMitzrayim. We left Mitzrayim, we left Egypt in haste. Halachma Anya b'nei Chorin. This is the bread of affliction. We are now free men or free women. And the ritual is that the father or the mother take the Seder plate and they walk around the room and they put it on the head of every single person sitting there, or they circle it around the head 3 times of every person sitting there. And there are various customs. One is that after circling around 3 times, you bump the head of the person sitting there, which can sometimes be painful because the ki'ara, the Seder plate, is rather heavy. Now, what's amazing about this illustration? Which is from the Barcelona Haggadah around the year 1350. This is the first mention we have of this custom. In other words, this illustration predates the verbal descriptions of this custom by a few hundred years. In other words, starting in the 18th century, we have many descriptions of this custom of the Seder plate on the head. But this illustration is from the year 1350, a few hundred years before the verbal descriptions of the custom. We see the custom in action in Barcelona around the year 1350. And many, many different explanations have been given for this custom. If the subject interests you, I urge you to look at my book, Inside Israel, Volume 2. The article is called Pesach Potpourri, and you can find it on the Schechter website. I discussed there 12 or 13 different Pesach customs. And one of them that I discuss is called the Seder plate on the head. And there I give many, many different sources about the Seder plate on the head. What is the reason for this custom? Some rabbis said that it is a way of protecting the people at the Seder from harm. If you circle the Seder plate around the head, it will protect them from harm in the year to come, which might explain why you do it 3 times. Because in Judaism, you do everything 3 times. A more scientific explanation was suggested by Dr. Tuvia Preschel in his article on the subject, published some 40 years ago. And he relates it to a Talmudic passage which talks about uprooting the table, right? Lama okrim et hashulchan. Why do we uproot the table? Which was a portable table used in Bavel some 18 or 1700 years ago. And Rabbi Yanai's academy replied so that the children should notice and ask questions. And Rabbi Moshe Pizanti, in his Haggadah published in 1569, he says that he found a source which says we must lift the Seder plate for the recitation of Manishtana. Furthermore, when they lift the Seder plate, they pass it over the heads of the participants in order that they should wonder about it and ask questions. In other words, Dr. Preschel suggests that the original custom was that they would lift the Seder plate or remove it from the table. Apparently, one year, while removing it from the table, it banged on somebody's head, and somebody invented a new custom of putting the Seder plate on everyone's head. In other words, the original custom was to lift the Seder plate and remove it for Manishtana. The secondary custom is to circle the plate around the head before we recite Halachma. And as I said, this is done by hundreds of thousands of North African Jews throughout the world. And it is a beautiful custom. And since one of the things we try and do at the Seder is get the children to ask questions, I can assure you every year the children ask, why are we doing this? So that is another illustration from the Schechter Haggadah, which has a realm of written sources behind it. The last thing I want to do and I apologize, first of all, that we don't have enough time to do this properly. But second of all, if anyone is offended by these illustrations, I apologize. I find this subject absolutely fascinating because it's a subject of censorship in the Haggadah. And I start out here with an illustration from Mark Shapiro's very interesting book, Changing the Immutable, Oxford University Press, 2015. And Professor Shapiro talks there about the censorship of Jewish books, not by Christian censors, but by Jews. And one of the things he shows in his books is what Haredi Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews, have done in recent decades in terms of self-censorship. And he starts out with this very cute illustration. This is the White House, May 2011. Hillary Clinton is sitting and watching when they go into bin Laden's compound and they kill him. In the illustration, which was reproduced in the Zeitung, which is a Yiddish Haredi newspaper in New York, you'll notice that Hillary Clinton has disappeared. In other words, they simply took the illustration and got rid of the women. Okay. Well, that is the background for this particular journey through the Haggadah. This is from the Schechter Haggadah, first edition, 2009. And this is a very famous verse in the Haggadah, which nobody really explains why it's here, Ezekiel chapter 16. And I grew, and you grew great and came to excellent beauty. Your breasts were formed and your hair grown, and yet you were still naked and bare, etc., etc. B'damai chayi, in your blood live, in your blood live. It's a standard part of every Haggadah. Okay, so as part of my attempt to include illustrations of Haggadot, I included this picture from the Prague Haggadah at 1526, which I already mentioned. And there's a picture of a woman with wild hair, and she's standing there, and on the top of her, it says the verse that we just read from Ezekiel. Okay. Now, after I published the Schechter Haggadah first edition, I got an outraged email from a person. I'm not going to mention his name. He's an expert in Haggadot. And he says to me, why did you censor the Schechter Haggadah? I said to him, what are you talking about? He said, the illustration you included of this woman is censored. I said, no, it's not. And I opened up this facsimile edition of the Prague Haggadah, and you can see that I took it from this facsimile edition, which was printed in Israel in the year 2004. Okay. This is what the facsimile edition looks like. They added color to all the pictures in the Prague Haggadah, but other than that, they claim that this is the Prague Haggadah. Well, in a minute, you will see that that is not the case. So I opened up another facsimile of the Prague Haggadah, and this is what I saw. In the original Prague Haggadah from 1526, the woman is much more distinctly a woman. She not only has breasts, but she also has nipples. In other words, the 2004 edition of this Haggadah decided to tone down the illustration from the actual Prague Haggadah, and they censored the Prague Haggadah from 1526. And as they say in Hebrew, ani nafalti bapach, I fell in the trap. I very innocently thought I was reproducing the Prague Haggadah of 1526. It turns out I was reproducing the Prague Haggadah of 1526 as censored in the year 2004. We continue. So now this is the second edition of the Schechter Haggadah, in which I did my mea culpa, and I added in the caption, a recent facsimile of the Prague Haggadah erased the woman's nipples and belly button. We mistakenly used that version in the first printing of this Haggadah. In other words, I wanted people to understand that I had not done that mistake on purpose. Now we continue, and we go to another famous Haggadah, which is the Mantua Haggadah of 1560. And in this Haggadah, the woman looks absolutely wild. Look at her hair. It looks like she could star in the musical Hair in 1970. She has hair down to here, down to there. So this is another illustration of a Haggadah, right? Another woodcut, where clearly the illustrators were not at all bothered by nudity. But there's another example of the censorship of this illustration before the modern period. And this I found in Professor Yerushalmi's wonderful book, Haggadah in History. Let me see if I can make this larger. Okay, remember, the verse in Ezekiel is talking about a young woman. It's talking about the development of a young woman. And what did the illustrator in the Venice Haggadah of 1603 do? He changed the young woman to a young man. It says here, Surat Ish Arom Ba'eryo. You know, he wasn't at all bothered about censorship. He said, this is not an Isha Aruma Ve'erya. This is an Ish Arom Ba'eryo. He changed the woman of the Haggadah into a man, into a boy. He still has wild hair, but of course he is now a boy and not a young woman. And finally, this goes back to our friend Yoel ben Shimon, who I told you illustrated 7 different Haggadot that we have in our hands today. We'll look at this illustration by Yoel ben Shimon, 1450, either Northern Italy or Ashkenaz. And this is his illustration of At Arom Ve'eryo, and the woman is naked. And it looks like she's participating in some sort of nudist beauty contest. Now, what I find amazing about this, and with this we will conclude, we are used to thinking that our rabbis and ancestors were very holy people, and they would never include nude illustrations of anything. Well, if you think that, you're wrong. Our rabbis were not prudish at all, and this goes all the way back to the Talmud, but certainly to the medieval period. And I discovered this anew when I published a responsum in Response in a Moment, Volume 5, Volume 4, which also appears in my Hebrew volume, Aseh Lecharav Shelot Utshuvot. And the question of my responsum was, why did IKEA eliminate all women from their Israeli catalog aimed at ultra-Orthodox Jews? And this happened in Israel back in 2017. IKEA published, all right, what do they call it in America? IKEA. IKEA published a separate catalog for Haredi Jews. An entire beautifully illustrated catalog. Not one woman appears in this catalog. So there's a picture of a Haredi kitchen with a man and his 2 sons. Needless to say, the Haredi men do all the cooking. There are no women at all in this catalog. So as I was asked by a German Jewish newspaper, Jüdische Allgemeine, I was asked by the reporter, is this really true? Are Jews really opposed to including women in illustrations? And I systematically proved in my responsum that is utter nonsense. This censorship of women was something developed by the Haredim during the past 40 or 50 years. And one of the things that I list here, based on Mark Shapiro's book, is the title pages of printed books. And this is what Mark Shapiro catalogs. The following classic halachic works were printed with totally or semi-naked women on the title page. Rabbi Yosef Karo, Shulchan Aruch, 1577. Rabbi Abraham Rappaport, Mincha Belula, 1594. Rabbi Jacob Polak, Vayakem Edut B'Yaakov, 1595. Rabbi Mordechai Jaffe, the Levush, 1603. Rabbi Yoel Sirkis, Response of the Bach, Frankfurt, 1697. Maimonides, Mishneh Torah, Amsterdam, 1702. And onwards and onwards and onwards. In other words, just that the rabbis of the Talmud were not afraid of discussing sensitive subjects, neither were medieval rabbis, and this included illustrations as well. So first of all, we have hundreds of illustrations of women in medieval Haggadot and medieval manuscripts, and in my response, I list about 75 of them. And secondly, as we saw today, we also even have illustrations of naked women in holy books. The rabbis were not the Haredi rabbis of today. They had a totally different attitude towards these subjects than the rabbis in Mea Sharim, a few kilometers away from where I am sitting. Those are the topics we have time to discuss today in our stroll through illuminated Haggadot. And now we will continue with our third lecture. And we have a special guest lecturer this year, Dr. Avi Bar Eitan. His wife, Dr. Tanya Surmer, was supposed to talk about the music of the Haggadah. Unfortunately, she developed laryngitis. Little did I know that one musicologist is married to another musicologist, and she was able to call in her husband to pinch hit. And Dr. Avi Bar Eitan is a composer, researcher, and lecturer. He has a PhD in musicology at Hebrew University. He teaches, among other places, at Hebrew University, at the Jerusalem Academy of Music, and he also composes chamber and orchestral music, as well as music for theater and film. Avi, bevakasha.
Thank you. It's really a great honor and pleasure to be here. I would like to ask Tanya to say a few words, and we'll go from there.
Hi, good evening. I actually just wanted to say very briefly hello, and that thank you for asking us to join. There is certainly an advantage to being married to someone in your own field, and so we actually spent the last couple of weeks discussing this topic quite extensively. And we started with the idea that in every generation, we're all supposed to experience Pesach as if we had been the ones who left Egypt, who were freed from Egypt. And we were wondering how this works with the musical expression of those ideas. And we connected that to the line from the Haggadah, V'nomar lefanav shira chadasha, that expression of renewal and that expression of every generation experiencing the freedom from Egypt, or the redemption from Egypt anew every year, then comes to be expressed through the prayer and through the music, and that every generation brings its own expression to that experience. And that's what we wanted to share with you this evening. It's actually the first day that I have a little bit of sound coming out. So anyway, with that, Chag Sameach, and I
thank you, Tanya. And I'm glad your voice is coming back.
Slowly but surely. Thank you.
Avi.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share the presentation with you in a second. So, ונאמר לפניו שירה חדשה. And again, good night to everyone. And let's start. The lecture, first of all, dedicated to the memory of Abraham Zigman, musician-composer who just passed away, and with three things that connected to his Torah here in this lecture. So let's go from here. When we're talking about music and we talk about Haggadah, we are talking about circles of times. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Eshel in his book, The Shabbat, its meaning of modern men, said that Judaism is a religion of time aiming for the sanctification of time, unlike the space-minded man who builds temples and pyramids in space. And the pyramids, of course, here you're taking another say in his book, he's trying to express that the pyramid itself takes place in space, and that's what at the end led for the slavery of the Jewish Israelites. In the Haggadah, we experience the past in the present. We go through a process of purification. We enter the Seder night and leave it different. Music is also perceived in time. We need time to experiment it. We need our consciousness to be fully present in the moment in order to experience it. Music serves as a tool that connects us to the consciousness, to experience the moment and to connect to the listening community. כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. The Haggadah serves as a vehicle through which we connect to the community of Seder participants, who are all part of the generation of people who say the Haggadah and experience the exodus from Egypt. What does it mean to be part of the community? To paraphrase the words of Professor Ariel Hirschfeld, literature professor in the Hebrew University, who said, the individual contributes his voice, such as it is, to the Seder, no matter how hoarse or out of tune. By doing so, the individual becomes part of the participant community and the chain of generations. By contributing to the communal singing and performance of the Haggadah, he receives his identity in return. Of course, I changed a little the words that continue that be connected to the Haggadah. He experiences a redemption from slavery to freedom in the broadest sense. So let's start. I'm going to show you something that it's between Zemer Ivri and Zemer Hasidi, something between Rabbi Shlomo Karlibach when he meets Yoram Talev, who just passed away a few weeks ago, and Sasha Argov. This song, this year, Pesach lands on Shabbat. So just imagine that in the radio broadcast at 4 o'clock, Shabbat, Arba Acharei Tzoraim, there is a program that when we listen to it is the most canonic Israeli song. And here we hear something that comes together in the preparatory for the army. You see many secular and the team people coming together, and that's what happened. Let's hear David Lavi and Tamar Philosophe when they start with Lulei Toratcha She'ashuai, and they continue with another song that Bein HaBroshim, it's not the HaBroshim, HaCholmim Achar HaShemesh. So we're starting with Karlibach, Lulei Toratcha. I hope that you have earphones, it will be better.
והכרם שניתנה עבור בין הערביים שותפות צלוליות את העמק ערב יפה וחמים שעת רבבות ותלמים אנו כמו כל החולמים
The hardest part of this lecture will be that we just can take small excerpts of the songs and we can hear all of them, so I hope that after the lecture you go and listen by yourself. This will be the hardest part. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. What does it mean for us? In the Haggadah we find the commandment to go through a process in which we personally leave Egypt. So what Mitzrayim contains the word narrow, tsar, we are going out of the narrow place. As it said in Psalms, Min ha-meitzar karati ya'anani b'merchavya, in distress, narrow straits, I called upon God. God answered me and brought me relief to a spacious place, as we interpreted it. In this lecture, we will see how the Haggadah is renewed in the generation by various groups. Ultra-Orthodox, secular, Dati-Leumi, national religious, Reform conservative, and Masorti. How people find contemporary meanings in the ancient text and how it is expressed in music. The tunes that we will discuss are connected directly to the text of the Haggadah or rephrase it. So everyone knows this movie Exodus after the book of Leon Uris. Exodus is a historical novel by Leon Uris about the founding of the State of Israel, beginning with a compressed retelling of the voyages of the 1947 immigrant ships Exodus. The music is by Henry Mancini. Let's hear the beginnings that will give us a feel of this. The horns that starts it. So we hear in the music the heroic things of the Exodus, and Leon Uris named his book Exodus. The re-entry into the country and the exit of Europe are, in his eyes, parallel to the Exodus from Egypt. In fact, entering the country is a reincarnation of the Exodus from Egypt. Zionist thinkers have developed the narrative that the return to Israel is in fact the return to the biblical Golden Age, in which Israel resides in his homeland. And if we started with Leon Uris or Mancini, we definitely can go to DreamWorks, The Prince of Egypt. The Prince of Egypt is a movie that made in 1998. They even called, Professor Avigdor Shinan, that is from the Hebrew University, from Midrashei Agadah, and this to give his thoughts about it. The music was composed by Hans Zimmer. Ofra Chaza performs the theme song from the movie Prince of Egypt. As Chaza sang the song in 18 different languages. The producer liked her so much that the image of Yocheved, mother of Moses, was illustrated in her likeness. So let's try to find exactly the place and start from there because we have such short time to hear all this beautiful music. So let's go from here. I know that the picture is not the best in Zoom, but I did my best.
ילדי הטוב והרע אל תירא ואל תפחד My son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live I pray we'll meet again if you will live
I wish you can hear more. And then Tanya and I went through the Haggadah. And of course we saw what everyone sees. The Kadesh, the Kiddush, the Magid, the Barech, the Hallel, the first part, the second part, the Nirtzah, and the Piyutim coming after. And we looked after the songs that are coming there. The Kadesh Rucha, Tzalach Ma'anya, Man Ishtana, Vadim Ayinu. All these songs got many kind of interpretations. Of course, in half an hour it can bring everything, but we tried to taste from all of these songs. And of course, at the end I've put Shir Shirim. Shir Shirim is not exactly in the Haggadah, but in Pesach we read in Shabbat, so it's quite important part of these whole things. And we tried to take excerpts from things and try to listen from songs and how they were renewed in the 20th and the 21st century. So everyone knows the traditional. Here is a Kadesh Uchatz. Here the traditional is by Natan Shachar, who passed away just a year ago. And I'm sorry, very musicologist friends just passed away. So everyone knows this Nusach, traditional. So I'm sure that most of you know this tune, but then we go to family traditions. My family too. They went with the song of David Zahavi, who was born in Israel in 1925. He was one of the first Israeli composers that were born in Israel. And David Zahavi wrote a song while he was 17 years old. He saw Yaakov Fichman words in the newspaper, and he just took them and took them as a recorder and started this tune that's called Orcha Bamidbar, who plays the tune about camels that goes in the desert, and the melody is quite, on one hand you hear that it's static, but it goes ups and down, and the words and the music go so well together that it becomes so beautiful. Many people performed it, Semed Ofarim, it with Esther Ofarim, or Netanela, or even Shoshana Damari. Let's start with Shoshana Damari music. You hear the bells on the neck of the camels that goes in the desert. You hear the bells, I hope. If not, just put earphones. So this is quite a known tune, Orcha Bamidbar, but just to imagine, I brought a piano here. Yamin Semol. So instead we can say Kain Kadesh Urechatz Kaepas Yachatz Magid Rachza Motzi Mahatza and it goes more and more. So we start this kind of, and of course, in the kibbutzim, they have a special seders that are making, and many Israeli songs make themselves into the seder of the kibbutzim. But let's go to the ultra-Orthodox and see what Hershey Rottenberg did with this song. So Moti Wiesel and Malchus Choir. So what you do if you want to bring Orthodox to do Kadesh Uchatz, just let's put them on camels. So please put them on camels, and here they are. You can move, you can enjoy. As you see, it's a beautiful music. It goes with the Seder table. So let's go to Kadesh Uchatzer. And I'm jumping to the Kadesh Uchatz. Hey, no. It came too early. It's just started here. So... When I seem, dipping into the just totally give you the Pesach experience. And now we are going to the Dati Leumi, and here we meet Tzvi Zalewski, one of my best friends, who is a great composer. He composed more than 12-15 records, and here you go with Halach Ma'anya, and he called me to join him to do the arrangement for this song. Tzvi Zalewski felt that this is connected to Ani Ma'amin that was sang in the Holocaust. It's kind of the hymn of the Holocaust. So he asked me, Avi, let's put the music and try to create a counterpoint. So we are going to see the part when I put the counterpoint of Ani Ma'amin here with Tzvi Zalewski tune to Halach Ma'anya. At the end, he asked me to put Leon Uris or Henry Mancini's song at the end of this. We just hear a small excerpts. So here it is. Here it's coming. 2:12. Let's try to aim. Here. Ani Ma'amin. Or we go again. I go back again, so that you hear the horns, the trumpet.
הלחמניה
You're reciting Zagad.
הלחמניה די יחלו אבתנה די יחלו אבתנה בארד מצרים הלחמניה די יחלו אבתנה די יחלו אבתנה בארד מצרים כל דכפי ייתה ויכול.
I don't know if you know, but if you look for the Tim Leumim kind of composers, there's not so many. You can speak about Chaim Kirsch, Yoshua Engelman, Zvi Zalewski, but there are not many composers who connected exactly to the stream or express kind of the things. And then we come to Arbat Achim, and of course, there we meet Naomi Shemer, that everyone loves, is a national composer and a poet. And we see there that she takes Arbat Achim to another place. Here, it's not exactly the Arbat Achim, it's kind of between a joke to a kind of something going there. The Chacham is meets the Chachama and marry her. The Rasha meets everyone get what he deserves. The Chacham, the Chachama, the Rasha, the Rasha. But, and the one who did not know how to ask, just took the most beautiful of all, he folded his hand in hers and returned with her to the Haggadah. And then she asked, where the ways went? Where are the 4 children? In our song, our friends, you need not to ask. So, maybe even when she says it, you need to ask yourself, so what is she trying to say? Sometimes maybe you don't need to ask too many questions. Just you need to do what you have to do, or what hearts tell you to do. In this case, the one who did not know how to ask just took the most beautiful and kind one. So let's hear Naomi Shemer Archion video. She sings by herself.
ביום בהיר ונהדר יצאו מתוך ההגדה חכם ותמרש הגדול וזה שלא ידע לשאול חכם ותמרש הגדול וזה שלא ידע לשאול.
Oh, I love her. And of course, we meet V'hishamd of Yonatan Razel for 2013. Yonatan Razel is my friend. He learned with me in the music academy one years above. And I asked myself, why did he do it? Why is the difference? What did he try to say is the difference with what we know? So we have 3 answers. One is this, that he's taking this music to the present time. Instead of saying, Amad aleinu lechalotenu, we say, Omed aleinu lechalotenu. It's a little problematic to think that all the time someone is going to kill us. But at the same end, as Jackie Levy said, he is saying the Kadosh Baruch Hu, he emphasizes that the Kadosh Baruch Hu metzalenu, so the Kadosh Baruch Hu is saving us, but every time, every door, someone tried to kill us. And I asked myself, why did he do it? So I looked what happened in 2013, and I saw that there's a tunnels of terror in Gaza, so maybe this was the reason that he did it. Here's a collaboration with Shweki, just the beginning. Of course, beautiful song. Yaakov Shweki, Yonatan Razel. Okay, let's see what he
טוב
says.
לכולם, באמת זה אירוע מאוד מרגש, גם בזמן מאוד מרגש. והשיר הזה, מילים מתוך ההגדה של פסח.
Arranged by Yonatan himself.
I'm going to jump a little, sorry. Going to... I'm sure that you know this tune, and I need to say that it's even sung by by Moshe Datz from Datz and Datza, who represent us in the Eurovision. And we see Bechol Dor Vador in Festival Semer Hasidic, the Hasidic Song Festival in 1969, by David Aster Yardeni. Then we continue, and we find in the Barech, so we see Eliyahu Hanavi. And of course, the Agada is aimed not just for adults, it's a lot of this connected for kids. So we see Leanna also music, Nurit Hirsch and Yarden Arazi here with their friends from Chocolate Menta Mastic. And it's from the television. The song speaks about Eliyahu Navi. When you open the door, Eliyahu Navi enters, and what happened? When Eliyahu Navi comes, what will happen? So just I'll go back for a second, just we'll hear a little that we have the taste of this.
בליל הסדר יקרה לי הנס, אפתח את הדלת והוא ייכנס, אמלא את הכוס, את כוס זהבו, ולא ארדם לפני שיבוא, אליהו הנביא, איך יבוא ומה יביא, אליהו הנביא.
So we see here kind of our phrase of secular people about it, and of course, as I said, it's for kids, so we can see it in Parpar Nechmad, one of the children's most beloved television. And here's Meshi Kleinstein's daughter of Rita Kleinstein. Same song. You see the turtle, see Uza, the goat. So it aimed for kids.
ולא ארדם
לפני שאבוא אליהו הנביא מעיינו. Okay, great song. So we continue and then we see that, you know, Barech, that everyone sing Arachama, Nu Yishlach Lanu, so it's not so early, it's from 75 by Chaim Kirsch, just the beginning with Semed Re'im.
הרחמן הוא ישלח לנו את אליהו הנביא.
And again, so songs that we know all the time are just written. And here we meet Dudu Fisher. He's a cantor and border singer. He played in the Les Miserables, and he, in 1988, he was invited to perform the role before the Queen Elizabeth II. So I don't have time now to show you the connection between Les Miserables and the Haggadah. Of course, redemption is everywhere, but the song Rachemna, you can hear here that it have a twist. I'll jump a little. Okay, and not jump a little here, I jump a little in the song. Okay. So the swing is coming back in 1988. And he's the one saying Bar Chinav, she's both connected to the Haggadah and to the Hallel. And then we see again Yaakov Shweki with a big hit that is Rachem. And Rachem, I'm sure that you know it, he was born in Jerusalem, moved to the United States, and he sang the Rachem that we all know from the ultra-Orthodox. That's the beginning of the introduction was beautiful, but too long. But it's part of the song now, everyone knows it. So we got jump. Okay, this is a song. I know that I didn't left with too much time because I assumed like 7 minutes or something, so I'm trying to push it up. I'm going to Rabbi Shlomo Karlibas, and everyone knows is a phenomenon by itself. If you ask if it's Dati-Laumi, no, Haredic, no, Hasidic, yeah, he's somewhere in the betweens of everyone, but he performed in many festival Hasidic song festival in Israel in the 70s, and here you see him sing Israel Betach B'Hashem, and of course he's speaking.
אמונה בביאת המשיח היא אמונה בקדושת עם ישראל.
And then of course, we need to steer the song itself, but it's... This was composed about 73, and then we find Mordechai ben David, but he adds Anachnu Ma'aminim, Nei Ma'aminim to this, and become a big hit in 2001. So it's quite recently, we just hear the beginning. And of course, the intro is very important. And of course, jumped, I pressed something. So talk about things that develop.
Avi, we need to wrap up in 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, because we
Okay,
started in 8:05, so I thought that it's half an hour. So I tried to wrap it.
I'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. It will be 3 minutes. So we find another beautiful song that is Mashiv LaHashem. Moshe Leif wrote it. Leibel Heschel, a great singer who died in his 30s, is really a great tune. What I wanted to try to show you is that both Charedim and secular and the Team Leumim and everyone's trying to heave. And here we come to one goat, to the Chad Gadya. And Shemer's version of Chad Gadya narrates the plot opposite of the original. The poet's goat go through only positive events. And this is a nice twist to the Chad Gadya, because he is such a successful goat. His is her handwriting. We just hear the beginning of the Chad Gadya of Nomi Shemer. Gdi Echad, Gdi Echad.
גדי אחד, גדי אחד, אבא לי קנה בדיוק ערב חג כמו לפני שנה לא העיקר עשב בר.
And just good thing happened to Gdi, but Nomi Shemer didn't just did this. She took another song that was composed by Angelo Branduardi in Italian, and she translated it. She took the melody, and Yossi Banai did it, and it's another Chad Gadya that we don't have time to listen. But then we come to Chad Gadya that was a big balagan, a big one mess. It's Chava Alberstein. She's an iconic singer, but a political protest song in the face of First Intifada and against Israeli control of terrorism. This song, which describes a blood cycle, is a paraphrase of the well-known song from the Passover Haggadah, was rejected for broadcast on radio station and drew stormy reaction against it. So we see that it's quite complicated. You can see the words here. When will this nightmare cycle end? Chaser and chased, bitter and beaten. When will this insanity end? What is it different for you? What is different? I am different this year. I once was a ram and calm little goat. Today I'm a tiger and a devouring wolf. I already was a pigeon and I was a fawn. Today I don't know who I am. So we just hear a little of this. This is and I left with 1.5 minutes, so in this 1.5 minutes I'll try just to say that we see ויהי בחצי הלילה, both in פסטיבל שירי ילדים, both in יונתן לארץ צבי, that say בחצי הלילה הם קמו with the Yoram Gaon. We don't have the time to listen for this, and I want to just say a few words and to end with this song from שיר השירים, אישי ריבו, השבעתי אתכם לא ירושלים. This is composed by Pinchas Breyer. What did we try to show here? And we're going to finish and to wrap it up. So we see this Haggadah, people interpret it in many, many ways. They take the text itself and compose it in the recent 50 years in many, many kind of things. And we are not talking just about people who are exactly the team, or teams. Everyone has something to say about it or to react to these words. And in these songs that we are ending this lecture, the performance is memory of the victims of the attack of Merkaz Harav. So Isha Ribo took the geyser from Yeshiva Letzeirim, and I'll end with this 1/2 minute, please, and we go on.
השבעתי אתכם, השבעתי אתכם בנות ירושלים.
When you find God, מה תגידו לו שחולת אהבה אני? May your Seder will be blessed with many songs and a lot of happiness, and may God will take mercy on us and his all crazy world and just help us, and we just be in one big piece. Thank you for being with me. Thank you.
תודה רבה, אבי.
Thank you.
כוח.
Thank you.
Our last and final lecture this evening or this afternoon in the States will be with Rabbi Professor David Frankel, who is an associate professor of Bible at Schechter. And he always manages to find very interesting points in the Tanakh. His topic is, who took the Jewish people out of Egypt, God, an angel, or a prophet? I think that he's still on mute. There you go.
There you go. Okay. Well, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Rabbi Golinkin, for inviting me. I would like, in honor of the upcoming holiday, to focus on a famous passage that we read in the Haggadah. And if I can manage to get it up on my screen, I'm going to read it for you in English and in Hebrew. And the passage, one second. Passage, I have to go back. The passage is something that everybody, I believe, is familiar with, and that is with reference to the Exodus. What do we say? We say that, is it here? No, one second. One second. Okay. One second. Okay. Here we go. And this is the text. From the Passover Haggadah, God took us out of Egypt. We say this passage every Passover Seder, not by an angel, not by a seraph, and not by a messenger. Rather, it was the Holy One, blessed be he, in his very glory, as it is written, I shall pass through the land of Egypt on this night and strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal, and I will perform judgments against all the gods of Egypt, I, the Lord. I shall pass through the land of Egypt on this night, I am not an angel, and strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, I am not a seraph, and I will perform judgments against all the gods of Egypt, I am not a messenger, I, the Lord, and no one else. So that's the passage. And whenever we have a passage that makes a strong statement, such as this, we have to ask ourselves one simple question. And that question is, why? One second. Having difficulty with this. Why? What is the point? Why is it so important to emphasize not an angel, not a messenger, not a seraph, etc., etc.? Why not just read the story and accept it as it is without all this emphasis? And I think whenever we see a text like that, we have to always say, what might be the other way of telling the story? In other words, if the passage in the Haggadah says, not by an angel, perhaps there are some people who said that it was by an angel. Otherwise, why bother negating it? Why bother insisting? And what's so bad if it would be an angel that you have to say, no, 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 it's not an angel. So something is going on here. And it's important to notice that in this passage in the Haggadah, two things are being talked about. One is taking out of Egypt, and the other is Makat Bechorot. Okay, those are two things that are very closely connected, obviously, but they're also slightly different. Makat Bechorot happened in Egypt, and then God takes us out from Egypt into the desert. And the section in the Haggadah says concerning both of them, both Makat Bechorot, both the plague of the firstborn and the Exodus, not by an angel, not by a messenger, only by God. So I'd like to quickly talk about both of these issues, both the Exodus from Egypt and the Makat Bechorot, the striking of the firstborn. And the first thing, perhaps since we don't have all that much time, I'm going to start with the story of the Makat Bechorot, the firstborn plague. So if you follow with me, I'd like to read with you what it actually says in one of the biblical passages about Makat Bechorot. And here's what it says. Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, select animals for your families, slaughter the Passover lamb. And as you remember, I'm not going to read all the words, but as you know, they were supposed to take for each house a sheep and slaughter the sheep at the front door, and then smear the blood on all parts of the door. The blood would obviously be on the bottom, and they would smear the blood on the top and on the side, and that would serve as a sign for God. And now I'm going to read sign for God that this is a Jewish house, so to speak, and God would pass over that house. However, things are not so simple. If you look in Exodus 12, verse 23, this is what it says. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe, and God will Pesach, will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Now, we notice all of a sudden that God is not really all alone here. Rather, during Makat Bechorot, during the plague of the firstborn, there is somebody called the destroyer, the mashchit in Hebrew. And this destroyer is what in rabbinic literature is later referred to as Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. But that means that during Makat Bechorot, during this plague, there is an angel there. Okay, now the question is, what is the meaning of this, that God passes over the doorway and does not permit the destroyer to enter the house and strike you down? What does that imply? Now, I would suggest that it implies that if God wouldn't see blood at the front of the house, at the door, he would allow, then the mashchit, then the destroying angel would enter the house of the Egyptians and destroy the firstborn. In other words, the implication of this text is that who was the one who actually would kill the firstborn son of the Egyptians? Not God himself, but rather the Malach HaMavet, the destroying angel. So now we already see that there's actually another way of talking about Makat Bechorot, which the Haggadah says, no, God did it all by himself, not by an angel. But at least one biblical passage implies that it was by an angel. Now, what's really interesting is to try and understand what the relationship between God and this destroying angel is. What is the relationship? Because if the destroying angel is destroying, then what's God doing there? And why does it say that God won't allow the destroying angel to enter? Now, here's where I have a rather radical idea to suggest, and it's not my own idea, but this is the idea that the word Pesach or Pesach, that we have always grown up learning and believing that it means to pass over, is not the correct meaning of Pesach. It's not really Passover. I'm not saying that we should rename the entire holiday, but Pesach does not, in this verse, apparently mean Passover, because right after it says that God Pesach, it says that he doesn't let the destroyer enter the house. Well, if God passes over the door and goes further, well, that sounds like then the destroying angel can just go in. And so some commentators claim that Pesach in this verse and in some other verses does not mean pass over, it means protect. And there are other biblical verses where Pesach or Pesach means protect. And that in that reading, we have an amazing depiction here. God sees the blood by the door, and he Pesach al hapetach. He guards at the door, and with his own divine body, so to speak, prevents the mashchit, prevents the malach hamavis from entering into the Jewish house. And that is what God does on Pesach. He doesn't pass over, he protects. Now, this, I believe, is the real meaning of Pesach and of the story of Makat Bechorot. However, one can well understand, I think, why the rabbis would not be so eager to promote this idea, this scenario, even though some midrashim say specifically this, that God stood and prevented the malach hamavet from entering. Why would the Haggadah not like this, not want to say that the angel did it, that the angel did Makat Bechorot, that the angel acted as the destroyer? In other words, why is the Haggadah saying not with an angel? I would suggest possibly that the idea that God is working, so to speak, together with a destroying angel, and even sometimes in order to stop that destroying angel, has to defend the Israelite houses from the destructive power of this angel, sounds very mythological almost, as if there were divine beings in some kind of a combat mode where God is standing at one end the destroyer is standing at the other end, and there's this implicit combat between them. And so in order to emphasize a higher level of monotheism, of the idea that there is one God and God is in total control, the rabbis of the Haggadah preferred to emphasize, no, all of this plague of the firstborn was God and God alone. Now, that was referring to the plague of the firstborn. Now let's go back to the story of the Exodus itself. In the story of the Exodus itself, we also have signs and verses that refer to angels. And I'm not going to read the text for you, but I'll just tell you for those who are interested in looking it up. In the book of Numbers, there is a story where the Israelites are wandering in the desert and they're confronting the Edomites. This is in Numbers 21. They're confronting the Edomites and they want to go through the Edomite territory. So they send a message to their brethren, the Edomites, and they tell the Edomites their story. And they say, we've suffered in Egypt. We cried out to God. God heard our prayers. And then the final line of their message is, and God heard our prayers, and he sent an angel and took us out of Egypt. Exactly the narrative that the Haggadah says never happened, not with an angel, not with a saraf, not with a messenger, but the book of Numbers says exactly that with an angel. And there are other texts aside from that, also a text in the book of Judges emphasizes that an angel came to the Israelites and said, I took you out of Egypt and I brought you into the land, and you should be thankful, and instead you're rebellious. But this is an angel speaking. So what we see is that also in reference not only to the plague of the firstborn, but also with reference to the very Exodus, there is this narrative which says an angel took the Israelites out of Egypt, as opposed to the Haggadah's narrative, which also follows verses, biblical verses, which is that God, by God's self, without any angelic intermediaries, took the Israelites out of Egypt. So what I'd like to ask is, what is the significance of the debate here, again, between God taking the Israelites out of Egypt or an angel taking the Israelites out of Egypt? And why is it that the Haggadah wants to emphasize so much one possible story or narrative or way of talking about the Exodus, God himself, and to reject another possible narrative, which obviously is recorded in important and valuable biblical texts, that God took the Israelites out with an angel? So there are several possible answers. And I will offer just a few suggestions and leave it for, further food for thought, and you can all try and perhaps raise this question at your Seder in the next few days, which is coming up. One idea that people have suggested is that there could be an anti-Christian bent to this. In other words, Christianity emphasizes not only that there is a father, but there is also a son figure, and that the two of them sort of like work hand in hand. And in order for the Jewish approach to be emphasized, to say that there is no Son of God, there is also a desire to say God does not work with any intermediaries, any messengers, any angels, any other type of beings. God works alone. And so when God took us out of Egypt, there was no one there, and that is the sign that redemption in the future as well, not only in the past, but redemption in the future as well, has to be God and not any intermediary. So that's one possibility. I would also suggest a more a different theological approach perhaps, and that is the fact that angels of all kinds, regardless not only specifically of Christianity, but angels in general, often can turn into, in the minds of people, into its own divinity. And we see this happen in Judaism as well. There's the use of angels on mezuzahs, and there are prayers to angels, and there are prayers even to dead tzaddikim, which all of these things are part of folk religion, but they are something that threaten the idea of God and God alone again. So for that reason as well, it could be that the Haggadah, or the passage quoted by the Haggadah, wanted to emphasize that Exodus was done by God and without any angel. And the last thing I'd like to suggest, and with this I'll close, is about the fact that we have two narratives at all. This is my question. Why is it that some passages say it was by God, and some passages say, no, it was by an angel? And there seems to be this duality in our tradition about the very central event of the Exodus. And I would suggest that what we have here is a tension between the belief in God's nearness and, on the other hand, the need for God to be above, beyond, high, lofty, and somewhat distant. So there's this tension between nearness and farness. When God becomes too near, too much a friend, he even comes by himself and takes us out of Egypt. There is a danger of God becoming almost like another part of Israel, another part of us, and then we don't have the sense of awe. We don't have the challenge of an awesome, high, demanding, challenging God. I once saw a bumper sticker that struck me recently, and it said, God is a national religious Zionist. You get it? God is a national religious Zionist. This is the bumper sticker that somebody was like put on their car. It's unbelievable, but this is what happens when God is so near to us, he just becomes a reflection of us. And everything we think is what God thinks. It's amazing how much he agrees with us. This is the danger when God becomes too near. And one of the functions of the angel concept is to say, no, 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 no. God is way up there. God is distant and judging and awesome, and don't feel like you have him in your back pocket, because you don't. And even when God takes us out of Egypt, God is a transcendent and glorious, but distant God. And we have to remember that. But there's a danger in that too, because when God is too distant and too grand and too lofty, there's the danger of him becoming so distant that he's no longer available to us. And that's when we have to put aside the idea of an angel standing in between us and having God be with us, right near us, taking us out of Egypt and bringing us to the Holy Land. So the message is perhaps that both of these narratives of the Exodus are important to keep in mind, and that we have to balance the idea of a near God and a distant God, of the Exodus by God himself holding our hand, so to speak, and the idea of the Exodus by an angel with God watching from a distance.
Thank you very much, Professor David Frankel. That was absolutely fascinating. I would like to thank all of our lecturers, Rabbi Irena Gritsevskaya, who talked about the meaning for the Exodus and the Haggadah in Ukraine today. Dr. Avi, who talked about the music of the Seder, and as we saw, he could have talked about it for hours. He managed to compress a huge amount of material into half an hour. David Frankel with his new interpretation of the word Pesach, and I continued with our journey through illuminated Haggadot, which I hope we will continue in years to come. I wanted to say that, David, it's interesting that you said the way the Haggadah so emphasizes that it's God and not an angel. I have here two books on my shelf. One is called A Dictionary of Angels in English. The other is called Malachei Elyon. These are dictionaries of all the angels that appear in the Bible and in rabbinic literature. It's huge. There are hundreds of angels that appear in the Bible and rabbinic literature. So it's interesting that specifically in this context of the Haggadah, that the rabbis made such a point of excluding the angels from the Pesach story, and I'll leave that for us to ponder at the Seder this year. I would like to conclude with a prayer, but I also wanted to thank Karen Rosen, who's been running this Zoom session and advertised it, Michal Makop-Peled, our Director of Development, and of course, all of our lecturers. I would like to conclude with this prayer using Professor Frankel's new interpretation of the verse. It says in Shmot Yud Bet, chapter 12, verse 23, Ufasach Hashem al hapetach v'lo yiten hamashchit lavo el batechem ningof. And God protected the doorway, the doorpost, and did not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to harm. And I think that this prayer this year has a dual meaning. First of all, here in Israel, where unfortunately we've been experiencing some terrible terrorist attacks during the past 10 days or so. We buried 3 wonderful young people today. And we ask God to protect us from this type of negev. And of course, the Jews and the non-Jews in Ukraine, we ask God to protect them from the mashchit, who unfortunately today is Putin and Russia. And with this prayer, we conclude our 4 lessons for Pesach. We hope that you will enjoy your Seder, or in Chutz La'aretz your Starim, that you will use some of the insights that you acquired in these 4 sessions. And if we cannot achieve the complete redemption of Eliyahu Hanavi, which was mentioned in some of the songs we heard, we can at least experience Atchalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemption, this Pesach. Thank you very much, and Chag Sameach.